Hey everyone, happy Thursday. It's beautiful out. Like I said, I hope you go outside and get some good sunshine and some air. It's been about 2 weeks now since this whole thing went down, and it's really, really important that you get some fresh oxygen, let the sunshine hit you a little bit. It does great things to the mood. That way, we're not all feeling like Holden Caulfield does at the end of chapter 14. Ha ha. This lecture will cover chapters 13 and 14, which are known as the sunny chapters. I was very much impressed by the quality and the maturity of a lot of your responses on the wall or stream, as the Google Classroom likes to call it. Keep them coming, all right? I promise I'm going to reward you guys in June if you stay active on the wall and show me some deep thinking about what it is that we're covering here. Catcher in the Rye should take us through spring break. We have yet to decide what will be taught next, but I'll keep you guys in the loop as soon as I know. Okay? All right, here goes, chapter 13. A lot of students oftentimes wonder why Holden decides to even hire the prostitute through what apparently seems to be some sort of a pimp, this man named Maurice, which Holden has a very violent altercation with afterwards. You have to remember something, Holden's mental state. You can argue that through the first half of the novel, really all this young boy has wanted to do is really ease his loneliness and find some sort of companionship. Yes, he constantly thinks about Jane, the person who probably matters the most to him from his past. And we discussed in the last couple of lectures as to why he doesn't ever call her. I think something that's very kind of heartbreaking for a lot of students when they read The Catcher in the Rye is that we never physically get to meet Jane Gallagher. Holden will never contact her. And we discussed at length that this is really his protector complex, that's so deeply ingrained in him that he's unwilling to even destroy a fond memory that he has. And once again, how sometimes people change and they become things that we don't remember them being when in the past or when they were younger. But I think he hires the prostitute because, he is feeling very lonely and a lack of companionship. And Holden has a lot of failed connections throughout the novel, especially the first half. Mrs. Morrow, for one, Stradlater, the cab drivers. No one seems to be able to ease his loneliness, and it's one of the reasons why he feels so depressed. I very much enjoyed reading your one-page responses on prostitution. It is a very debatable topic. Next year, when you guys take the Regents, you will be chosen to write an argumentative essay, and you will be given a topic as controversial as, let's say, the legalization of prostitution. My job as your teacher is to be as objective as possible, so I'm not going to share my own personal beliefs, but there are a lot of arguments for the legalization and against the legalization of prostitution. Keeping prostitution illegal, like, for example, making a lot of drugs illegal, does tend to create, according to a lot of sociologists, a really negative environment for these young people who resort to prostitution. Because it is illegal, it is crime-ridden, it's full of men and women like Maurice who take advantage of others. I think we're very well aware in today's society about sex trafficking and things like that. So while there's an argument to keep prostitution illegal because it's seen as immoral, the act of also keeping it illegal ensures that it's crime-ridden, full of disease. It's very interesting, but if you look at the statistics of countries such as the Netherlands in Europe, where prostitution has been legal for quite some time, there's a very low rate of STDs because the prostitutes are made to take monthly physical exams and apply for prostitution licenses. And it seems to be because it's legalized that it's a much more safer environment for those who wish to work within that kind of structure. So it is an interesting debate whether or not people have the right to monetize their bodies and sexuality. You might be against prostitution, but by that means, should pornography fall under the same kind of moral standpoint? If prostitution is illegal, why is pornography legal, right? It is an act, in essence, of prostituting oneself and one's sexuality in order to gain or to monetize it, in order to gain material wealth. So it's an interesting debate in many ways. And it's one that warrants a conversation. I'm kind of upset that once again we don't get to meet in person and I can hear your input and we can kind of debate some very good questions that I'm sure a lot of you have. Always remember that in life, guys, nothing is as simple as black or white. That's one thing that I usually use the second half of the year to really stress in my classes with a lot of the literature that we would have read together and short stories and poems, is that, you have to be careful what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, what's patriotic, what's unpatriotic. These kind of like divisive lines don't allow for a conversation, which really is what helps to grasp a topic. Years ago, I had a student of mine who said that his parent worked in the healthcare industry for patients that were mentally ill and really like confined to an institution, and that his parent works overseas in a different country for a long time, and said that the clinic actually hired prostitutes to come in and give the mental patients companionship and, yes, sexual interaction if necessary, but that it went a long way towards kind of combating mental illness and depression. And so it's an interesting kind of idea, right? Nothing's ever clear, yes, no, moral, immoral. In that case, prostitution is something that can be used in essence to kind of further help someone's health, mental health. So once again, something that's very much a cause for debate, and something that's been in recent media lately, where people are debating whether or not sex workers should be allowed the ability to legally conduct their business. Coming back to the chapter and coming back to The Catcher in the Rye, though, Holden obviously seems to have gone through or accepted Maurice's offer very clearly because of his kind of loneliness. When he gets back to the room, he writes, "I went to my room and put some water on my hair, but you can't really comb a crew cut or anything. Then I tested to see if my breath stank from so many cigarettes and the scotch and sodas I drank at Ernie's. All you do is hold your hand under your mouth and blow your breath up towards your old nostrils. It doesn't seem to stink much, but I brush my teeth anyway. Then I put on another clean shirt. I knew I didn't have to get all dolled up for a prostitute or anything, but it sort of gave me something to do. I was a little nervous. I was starting to feel pretty sexy and all, but I was a little nervous anyway. If you want to know the truth, I'm a virgin." I find this to be one of the more sadder moments of The Catcher in the Rye, especially once we meet Sunny and we get to realize what a tragic figure she is. It makes Holden preparing for her that much more sad. I mean, in all essence, this is supposed to be Holden's first time. I was very impressed with your responses yesterday as to like what a person's first time should be like, and this is one of the more funny moments had we met in class, where I would have fielded a lot of your questions and I would have revealed to you some very interesting statistics. I saw the word romanticized a lot, and yes, oftentimes a person's first time is romanticized by society and literature and the media as this magical moment that oftentimes falls short of expectations. Keep in mind that romanticism happens when we idealize something as being very different from the actual reality. So I'm going to share with you some statistics and also some prior conversations I've had with other classes in the years past teaching The Catcher in the Rye. Some people hold the belief that a person's first time should be waiting for marriage, and that's the more traditional view. I think for a lot of human history in the past, humans oftentimes did wait for marriage. People got married a lot younger. Sex was seen as this kind of union of souls, something that was done under God in a religious way, and some people still believe that and have those religious views, and their religion and their culture teaches them that one must stay virginal or pure until marriage. However, the statistics, particularly in American society, dictate or reveal something very differently, right? That the majority of American society does not go into marriage as virgins. Something like 80% of our population has had some sort of previous sexual experience with a different partner before they actually get married. So statistics show that a lot of Americans are having much more premarital, which means before marriage, sex. And it's interesting, although 80% of Americans have, in recent surveys, confessed to having a sexual partner before actually marrying, the argument for saving yourself for marriage is that it is something that two people have never shared with anybody else, and it is pure, and it is something special that they get to share together now as husband and wife, or husband and wife and wife. Nowadays, everything is socially acceptable. But the idea there is that also the argument is that, well, sometimes because sex in our society is regarded as such an important part of a relationship, what if two people end up getting married? And what if they're not sexually compatible? What if it starts to happen that when things start to get intimate, they don't find the connection, let's say, in the bedroom that they would find in other aspects of life? But at the same time, there's the argument that, sex shouldn't be that important a part of a relationship. I mean, I know as adolescents, where the world of sexuality is really starting to open up its doors to you, it seems ever increasing and ever important. But the argument, I think, also that relationships are more than just the physical. And I think this is displayed through the character of Holden, who physically feels these desires when he sees things through the window of the Edmund Hotel, or when Sonny first comes into the room. But ultimately for Holden, and you'll see this by the end of the novel, sexuality and sex is more than just a physical gratification. But more, I think he views it as is in accordance with Holden's character, as this pure kind of intimate, soulful connection between two people. Not just a union physically of the body, but more importantly, maybe a union of emotion, of the soul, so to speak, if you want to get spiritual about it. Now, coming back to why the encounter with Sonny fails, yes, it fails in part because of Holden's idealized view of what sex should be about. But I think ultimately it fails right here at this moment, which I'm going to read for you. She came in and took her coat off right away and sort of chucked it on the bed. She had on a green dress underneath. Then she sort of sat down sideways on the chair that went in with the desk in the room and started jiggling her foot up and down. She crossed her legs and started jiggling this one foot up and down. She was very nervous for a prostitute. She really was. I think it was because she was young as hell. She was around my age. I sat down in the big chair next to her and offered her a cigarette. I don't smoke, she said. She had a teeny little weeny whiny voice. You could hardly hear her. First of all, it's very classic here. Many of you might have picked up on this, but Holden is obviously exhibiting a defense mechanism. Sonny's not the one who's nervous here. The one who's nervous, obviously, is Holden. First times can be nerve-wracking, obviously, and Holden is full of nerves. Sonny has probably done this quite often. So the one who's nervous isn't her. It's very obviously Holden. Then the chapter says, "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jim Steele," I said. I found this to be one of the funnier moments in The Catcher in the Rye, even when I was a kid reading it. Many of you might have picked up on it, but look at Holden. He's presenting an image of himself which is just the opposite. He's nervous, he's a virgin, he's self-conscious and insecure at this moment. So what does he do? He creates this strong name for himself, Jim Steele. And the truth is, he's just the opposite. "You got a watch on you?" she said. She didn't care what the hell my name was, naturally. "Hey, how old are you anyways?" "Me? 22. Like fun you are." It was a funny thing to say. It sounded like a real kid. You'd think a prostitute and all would say, "Like hell you are," or "cut the crap," instead of "like fun you are." "How old are you?" I asked her. And this is the moment, I think, that many of you wrote about in your comments, where the encounter very quickly sours, because Holden realizes that Sonny perhaps is even younger than he is. And this is one of the sad truths about prostitution and like this dark underbelly of sex trafficking and sex work, is that oftentimes, young people, in particular young ladies, young girls, are kind of lured into this lifestyle. To me, Sonny is by far the most tragic figure in the entire novel. This coming-of-age novel where you have a young boy who values innocence and purity and beauty and all the things he had as a child, and is starting to learn the evil and dark ways of the world. And here Sunny represents a character who's had everything that is childish and young and innocent really ripped away from her. I mean, imagine for a second what brought Sunny to this moment. What kind of childhood did she have? What did she experience? One of the things that saddens me also about this chapter is, Holden imagines Sunny going to the store to buy that green dress and the people not knowing why she's buying it. And that's exhibits like a very deep thinking about life by Holden and also Salinger. This idea that we don't really know each other. We don't know what goes on in each other's lives in some ways, and our secrecies and the privacy of our own home and what we combat on a daily basis. And look at Sunny. Look at her name. It's so ironic because she's probably the least, quote, sunny character in this entire novel. Her life is anything but sunny. Most prostitution like this encounter takes place at night where there's a lack of sun. And remember what the sun and light always symbolize in literature. Light, knowledge, things that are positive. And Sunny represents a very dark character. I think her name was chosen very ironically by Salinger as this character who's very negative and represents really a loss of innocence, a coming of age, that even though Holden's journey seems to be very dark, Sunny's was probably a lot darker. And when Holden starts to see her little voice, or hear her little voice, see how she jiggles her foot up and down, the way she acts so childish at times, like when she says like fun you are. Many of you guessed it, but his protector complex kicks in. And he sees in Sunny not someone that he can satisfy a physical pleasure with, but this young lady, this young girl who deserves to be innocent and pure, that instead has gone down this very dark path. Look, I said, I don't feel very much like myself tonight. I've had a rough night, honest to God. I'll pay you and all, but do you mind very much if we don't do it? Do you mind very much? The trouble was, I just didn't want to do it. I felt more depressed than sexy, if you want to know the truth. She was depressing. Her green dress hanging in the closet and all. And besides, I don't think I could ever do it with somebody that sits in a stupid movie all day long. I really don't think I could. And I really think that Holden dodges a bullet here by not actually going through with what he had planned to do with Sunny. I think that in the long run, it would have done more harm than good. Let's talk a little bit about what a person's first time should be like. Ideally, the way it's romanticized, the first time should be between two people that care very deeply about each other. Although many of you now are mature enough to realize that sometimes sex can be separated from emotion, from deep personal connection. And we seem to be living in a society that increasingly portrays sex as just this kind of physical gratification and not so much this kind of union that is supposed to be special and pure. The truth is, for the majority of Americans, I mean, like we discussed earlier in the lecture, 80% of Americans have confessed to having premarital relations before marriage. And this is what's alarming too. The same statistic, 80% of Americans completely regret their first sexual experience. Either why it happened, the partner that they chose, succumbing to some sort of pressure in order to do it. First times can be awkward. They should be awkward because of a lack of experience, because of a lack of comfort sometimes with the person that you're with. Sometimes first times happen because of either a social pressure, right? Well, it's 18. Well, it's prom night. Well, everyone else is doing it, and I haven't, right? And oftentimes because of these underlying reasons for why people go through with it, as opposed to the real reasons that should happen, such as love and connection and intimacy, right? Oftentimes the experience very much falls short. So I think it's very eye-opening, right? That while many Americans are having more sexual encounters before marriage, that the majority of Americans really regret their first experience. And I think that's something that a lot of you need to keep in mind as young adults, as adolescents who are embracing adulthood, and obviously sex being some of the more adult things that you will embrace as you come of age. But the idea there is that, the first experience with anything is something that should be memorable. It should not be full of anything negative. And that oftentimes that first experience falls short for many compared to what they've romanticized or idealized in their mind. And the truth is, you never forget your first experience. And what you don't want to do, and again, if we were in class in our discussions here, I think I'd be able to transmit this to you in a much more humorous way. But the truth is, you never forget your first, right? And you don't ever want to look back at life, let's say when you're 50, 60, 70, and someone asks you, hey man, what was your first time? And you hit yourself in the forehead and you go, oh, that stupid idiot. Either in regards to yourself or the person you were with. But as is everything in life, everything is a learning experience. And even though for the majority of people, according to statistics, that first time falls short, you learn, you grow with experiences. And, sometimes you have to have your heart broken in order to learn how to love. So if some of you have had a negative first experience, it's not the end of the world. No, you most likely will never forget it. But it's an opportunity to grow, to move forward, to mature, and to better define and distinguish in your mind the kind of people that you want to surround yourself with, that deserve to be in your life and deserve to share something like sex that is special with you. Now, after Sonny leaves, it's very obvious how low Holden's mental state is, because he actually starts to do something that for most therapists or psychologists would be something a little bit kind of worrisome. After old Sonny was gone, I sat in the chair for a while and smoked a couple of cigarettes. It was getting daylight outside. Boy, I felt miserable. I felt so depressed you can't imagine. What I did, I started talking sort of out loud to Allie. I do that sometimes when I get very depressed. I keep telling him to go home and get his bike and meet me in front of Bobby Fallon's house. Bobby Fallon used to live quite near us in Maine. This is years ago. Anyway, what happened was one day Bobby and I were going over to Lake Sedabago on our bikes. We were going to take our lunches and all and our BB guns. We were kids and all, and we thought we could shoot something with our BB guns. Anyway, Allie heard us talking about it, and he wanted to go. And I wouldn't let him. I told him he was a child. So once in a while now, when I get very depressed, I keep saying to him, okay, go home and get your bike and meet me in front of Bobby Fallon's house. Hurry up. I think this is also a very sad moment. This is probably some of the darker moments for Holden in the novel, his encounter with Sonny. And then his confession here that he has this deep regret. I think one of the things that unfortunately happens when we lose loved ones is we look back at life and we think of the things we could have said, should have said, but maybe didn't. And Holden has this negative memory here, right? You can tell it's full of regret. Remember that we discussed earlier in the year that as opposed to guilt can be fixed. You can confess, you can fix something. Regret is a much darker emotion because it means it's something that you can't fix. And obviously, Allie's not around here to fix this, but Holden has this deep regret of a time he should have spent with his brother that he didn't. And once again, literature's ability to teach us to be better people is that, we do have to kind of realize during the moments that we're living and we're alive, those are the moments that we should tell the people that we care and love about and spend as much time with them as we possibly can. And Holden's speaking out loud here. It's very normal, like we discussed in class also, to speak out loud to yourself, especially in places like in front of the refrigerator or random thoughts throughout the day. But Holden here is speaking to someone that is dead as though they were alive. It shows a lot his issues with closure. And unfortunately, Holden is going to be discussing death quite frequently leading up. Don't forget, he is approaching a sort of nervous breakdown by the end of the novel. After discussing Allie and Bobby Fallon and this deep, regretful memory that he has, Holden talks about praying. Again, look how unreliable he is as a narrator. I don't believe in God, but he decides to pray. And the truth is, this warrants a little bit of a conversation, too, about the role of prayer in our lives. I know some of you believe in God, some of you don't. Some of you believe in God and you pray quite often. Others of you believe in God, but you only pray when we need something, you know, when we want to do well on a test, or when we are scared of punishment, or things along those lines. And look at the little detail. Look what he picks up, right? For those of you who are Christians and maybe you know a little bit better the narrative of Jesus, Jesus was betrayed by his friends. And Holden mentions this. I mean, you don't have to be a psychologist to figure out that this is a boy who feels very alone, who feels like he's been betrayed by everything around him, right? Much the same way you can argue that in the narrative of Christ, he was also betrayed by those people he kept the closest, his disciples. All right, everyone. Hope you have a great sunny day. It's beautiful out. Like I said, make sure you go outside, get some sun, get some oxygen, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully these lectures are imparting to you guys a lot of the wisdom or the things I've learned about The Catcher in the Rye, and it feels a little bit more like being in class. I love you guys. Miss you all. All right? Be good. Hey, everyone.